Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex ideas, get you informed fast. Today, we're taking a critical look, unfiltered, at how our systems, economic, healthcare, political, how they really work. Our source for this deep dive is a really thought-provoking video. It's called "The System is Broken, but Not for Who You Think." And it puts forward this bold critique, basically arguing that what looks broken to most of us, well, it might actually be working perfectly fine for certain others.
Exactly. And the video, it kicks off with this really strong assertion. It says the modern system isn't actually failing. Instead, it argues it's succeeding in maintaining inequality, designed, it claims, to benefit elites, corporations, the ruling class.
Yeah.
It's not the average person. And that's where it gets, well, really provocative, I think.
Right. So our mission today is to pull out the key insights, the maybe surprising facts from this viewpoint to help you understand this alternative take on how things are structured. Okay. Let's get into it. So let's jump right into that main argument, the maybe controversial one from the source material. The system isn't broken. It's actually working as intended. It's just not intended for you.
That's the core of it. And what's really striking, I think, is this idea that what looks like failure to most people is actually, from another perspective, a successful design, for a select few anyway. The video posits the structure itself is built to, maximize profit, maintain control, and that this intentionally perpetuates inequality.
And the source uses some pretty sharp economic examples, doesn't it? To show this working as intended idea. It points right at, rent skyrocketing. The general cost of living just keeps climbing.
Yeah, and some really specific, almost jarring examples, like a Big Mac costing up to $13 in parts of the U.S. The video frames this not just as, inflation, but as something more chilling, like basic things that were always accessible are becoming luxury items. Changes what affordable even means, right?
And if you look wider, the source also points to that stark difference in insulin costs. $300 in the U.S., maybe $30 in Canada. It presents this as, pretty clear evidence of corporate price manipulation, not just random market stuff. The implication is it's about different regulations, different patent laws, allowing these huge gaps.
And it's not just daily costs. The source also really zeroes in on student debt, suggesting it's this crushing weight on young people, before they even get started properly. Exactly. And the key takeaway from the source here is these trends, they're not random accidents. They're presented as deliberate outcomes. Consequences of systems really designed to maximize profit, maybe limit social mobility.
And this view, it also really questions our old beliefs about education, doesn't it? That whole idea of good grades plus a degree equals success. We all heard that growing up. But the source argues, maybe that formula is kind of broken now.
Yeah, it even gives that surprising detail that even highly educated people, doctors, government workers, they often struggle to buy a home now. Which makes you think about social mobility, doesn't it? What's happening there?
It really does, and it makes you ask. The source brings up AI and automation, too, how those are destabilizing the traditional paths to, getting ahead financially. So the conclusion drawn to the source is that for a lot of people, education isn't that reliable ladder anymore. It might even be a financial trap. The healthcare system gets put under the microscope, too, in the video. Points out millions are still uninsured or underinsured. That's a huge ongoing issue. And it stresses this critical point, medical debt, cited as a leading cause of personal bankruptcy. That's significant.
Right. And a key point the video makes, the systemic diagnosis it offers, is that even when governments make changes, healthcare costs just keep going up year after year. And this inflation, the source argues, it's driven by corporate lobbying, by systemic inefficiencies, not really by better care or, public health goals.
Okay, so if the economic and social systems seem, let's say, rigged from this perspective, what about government? The institutions meant to represent us. The video looks critically there, too. It observes that leaders often are from a different economic era, maybe disconnected from what people are struggling with now.
And the video also gets into this argument that just swapping old leaders for younger ones, it might not change much, because the fundamental structure, the framework they operate in, that stays the same. That's the real issue it contends, not just who's in charge.
Which leads to this really powerful claim. Laws get shaped by lobbyists, funded by corporations, not necessarily by the voters.
Yes, and the source uses some strong language here. It describes campaign donations, lobbying, as basically legalized bribery. Just, wrapped up in legitimacy. There's this vivid metaphor it uses. It says, it's like the rules of Monopoly being rewritten mid-game by the richest player and everyone else still hoping for fairness.
Now, the speaker in the video, they also touch on foreign influence, specifically mentioning AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, calling it a powerful lobby group with significant influence on U.S. policy. And the source gives a specific number here, $3.8 billion a year in U.S. aid going to Israel, pointing out this happens despite, well, urgent needs back home. That's the perspective presented.
Right. And the video's viewpoint is that if you try to speak out against this, you often get shut down. Accusations like anti-Semitism get thrown around. So the perspective offers that this shows geopolitical priorities trumping the people's needs. U.S. citizens lacking basic health care while billions in military aid flow out. Again, we're just reporting the source's viewpoint here, strictly neutrally.
Look, the situation for younger generations is another big theme. They're portrayed as inheriting just enormous national debts and a system that feels, well, degraded. The source highlights this perceived lack of representation, lack of real political power for them, and how this thing it calls intergenerational theft has become almost normalized. It paints a pretty bleak picture for young people, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And to connect this, the source dives into this idea of the illusion of democracy, saying, elections, from this perspective, they give you the illusion of choice, but not real reform. Because the real power stays entrenched no matter which party wins. Each party might make small tweaks, maybe, but they also expand control in subtle ways. There's that stark analogy again. Changing the driver of a bus going off a cliff doesn't stop the crash, meaning, superficial changes. They don't fix the fundamental systemic problems.
Wow, okay. We've really gone deep into this source material, and I guess to sum up that central message from the video, it's stark. The system is not broken. It's working as intended, just not for you.
Exactly. And the video presents itself as a call to awareness, a call to maybe even disobedience. It encourages viewers to recognize their own power, maybe stop complying blindly, and to understand how these structures, according to the source, are rigged against the average person.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, listening? We've explored a perspective suggesting our systems aren't failing by accident, but might be deliberately designed to work in ways that, well, don't serve everyone equally, despite how they look on the surface.
Yeah, and if we think about the bigger picture here, it really challenges us, doesn't it? To look past the surface issues, the day-to-day headlines, and really consider the intentions behind the structures shaping our lives. It really prompts that question. When you look at the world, are you seeing failures? Or are you seeing the successful execution of some kind of unseen plan?
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. If this perspective holds any water, if the system is working as intended for some, what kind of awareness and maybe what kinds of actions could actually lead to change that serves everyone? What stands out most to you from this deep dive today?
Welcome. I'm gonna go for a walk as usual. I'm using my exoskeleton as I usually do, and I have a lot of bullet points I want to go over with you. So I'll just take a walk and try to go through them all. Well, the subject I'm talking about is the issue we have nowadays with the world we live in and how to make it a better place. So there's a solution, but people generally don't want to listen to it. Anyways, I'll just try to go through my bullet points because there are a lot and it will take me a long time to go through them all. So the first one is that rent is up. A Big Mac is now in certain places in the US $13. The cost of living is skyrocketing, while wages remain stagnant. So you have prices that go up and wages remain stagnant. And as I will explain to you, this is by design. That is what the system wants. Even basic items like fast food have become luxury priced. Now, I give you another example. Insulin is $300 in the US and it's only $30 in Canada. So life-saving drugs are absurdly overpriced in the US. The pricing reflects corporate profit, not healthcare logic. So nothing really makes sense in the world we live in. For us, now for the elite, it makes a lot of sense. For the healthcare companies and all the rest, for them it makes all the sense in the world. Because how could it be better than to sell a product just because there's an imaginary line somewhere 10 times higher? I mean, that's great for people who are involved in it. But for the normal people, you and me, it isn't such a great idea. We can take another example, crushed by student loans. So young people carry crushing debt before even starting their careers. So you're already very heavy in debt before you even started anything. before you have even worked. Education has become a financial trap, not a ladder. So people still believe that it's like in the past, that you just need a good curriculum, that you just need a good diploma, and that everything will be fine. But today, with AI and the current state of affairs, everything has changed. So if you believe still that the old system will do you any good, you will find out very soon that it's broken and that it won't work and that what your parents could do cannot do anymore. I have a friend that I see on a regular basis. She's quite old and she has 2 kids. Now, both of them, one became a doctor and the other one works for the government. But look, so they do not have any real estate. They both work. They both have great diplomas. They're both considered very smart and extremely intelligent. They walk the line just as they're supposed to do. But they don't starve to death. But one is still living with her mother, the girl, and the boy, one is a doctor, but I don't think he has any real estate. I will ask. Anyways, I'm just telling you that it's different than in the past. It's not because you've walked in the normal path that you will succeed. And healthcare is still broken. So millions remain uninsured or underinsured. Medical bills, leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the US. So a lot of people get into bad situations because they can't afford healthcare. They get sick and then they have to pay some stuff and they have to sell the house, so on. That's a common thing in the US. Of course, you can change one government for the next, but the main theme rests the same everywhere. It doesn't matter where you will face the same kind. Of course, one government will take a little better care of the slaves and the other one a little less, but it's bickering on small details. The system is broken. The underlying system is broken. And I try to explain it to you during this small talk. So healthcare costs are always rising. Every year, healthcare cost increases regardless of who's in charge. Inflation and systemic inefficiency drives prices up endlessly. So it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter for who you vote. You can vote for whoever you want. They're all part of the same club, and they will all do the same. By that I mean, they will make the state more powerful. And the more powerful the state gets, the less power you get. Now that's self-evident. Look, if I'm in a household, either I'm powerful, or my wife is powerful, or my kid is powerful, or my sheep is powerful. But if you give power to somebody else, you will take power from other people. So the issue is that you keep always feeding the beast. You always make the entity that is most evil the most powerful. And that's a very dangerous game to play. And you should stop doing this. Now, if we look at our leaders, they are too old and too rich. The ruling class grew up in a different area and economic reality. So they come from a very different world. I think that they're like 60, 70 or 80 years old, the guy in parliament and your de-elected leaders. They're always very, very old. Don't get me wrong. Even if you get young leaders, the result will still be the same because whatever you do, the same people get in power. And once they're in power, they make sure that their friends are very well off. And it's a joke. You have 600 de-elected leaders in the US. And you have 320 million people, if I'm not mistaken. And you want to tell me that 320 million people cannot stop the madness of 600 de-elected leaders? Man, that's a joke. Of course you can. As soon as you realize what your power is, as soon as you stop being compliant, it will all stand very, very fast. Yes, they have immense power. As long as you give them that power, as long as you do everything they say, then they have immense power because they have to do nothing and you do everything for them. But as soon as that changes, as soon as you wake up, they have no more power. It's over. It's a joke. From the beginning on, it was a joke. You can stop it whenever you want. So the thing with those leaders is that they legislate for a world they no longer understand. And they never really understood it. The only thing they understood that it's very easy to make money and life is very pleasant when you can use extreme violence against everybody inside of the country and outside of the country. That's the only thing they do. Apart from that, they know nothing. Now, laws are made by lobbyists. Corporate-founded lobbyists shape the rules. Elected officials often serve donors. So you must realize that the system is rigged and that anyways, they have never your interest at heart. They have the interest at heart of people who give them money. You don't give a lot of money. So they have their interest at heart. This is normal. It's the same for every human being on earth. If I have a beggar that gives me nothing, and next to him I have a guy who comes out of a private, has a very nice house, a very nice car, and says, hey, here, I give you 10, 50, 100 million, and so on. And all you have to do is be a little nice to me when the moment comes. I'll tell you what to do. Of course, you will say yes. Why would you care about the beggar in the street? He does nothing for you. He's dirty. You don't want to smell him. You don't want to see him. You don't want to hear him. Get the nice guy out of his private jet with all this million. You listen to him and you do what he says. And they always did. And they always will. So what I'm talking about is legalized by rules. So I want to tell you that campaign, donations, and lobbying are dressed up as legality, but they function as direct pushers of influence and power. So it looks all legal. They say it's the law and all that stuff, but they make up that law. It is not the law of Jesus. It's not the law of Socrates. It's not the law of Epictetus. It's the law of your dear elected leader. And that law only serves them. That's why it exists. Now, I have to talk about a country. Everybody knows it's in the news, always. But you cannot be critic about it without being labeled an anti-Semite. At least it's very hard. So I'll try to go over the next couple of points that touch that country. And I hope that I get away with it without my video being taken down or my channel getting banned. And if you want to know more about that, well, then you have to do some research. Because on the tube I'm talking right now, that it won't fly if I talk about that. So I'll try to be a nice boy and say it in a way so that the least amount of people get offended. But I cannot do any miracles. The things are as they are. So speaking out against Israel policies is often silenced by accusation. Free speech is selectively protected. So you have free speech, but only up to a certain point. Only up to you don't really mess it up. You don't really make people angry. And as soon as you say something that they don't like, I can say a lot of crap about Biden, a lot of crap about Kamala, a lot of crap about Trump. They all deserve it. And more or less it flies. But if you go for the next couple of stuff I'll talk about, then no. There you go too far. There are things you should not do. I'll still try to do it in the most sterilized manner that is possible. So there's something called AIPAC, and you should look it up. It's spelled AIPAC, and it's a lobbying influence. AIPAC shapes US policies to benefit Israel. Many US politicians actively cooperate with its agenda. So what I've just said is just the definition of AIPAC. I'm not making any stuff up, and I shouldn't get banned for that. I'm telling you what is the most obvious thing. But the next point comes to it. Foreign powers shape policies, whose decisions are often guided by foreign influence. Domestic priorities are shielded for geopolitical gains. So you must realize that if you have that, and that's a very powerful lobby where most people subscribe to, check. There are very few, I think, if any, that do not subscribe to that lobby. But I'll let you check for yourself. But then you have foreign powers who are shaping policies. And everybody thinks that's great. No, it's not great. But even if you change that, it wouldn't change anything. Okay? It is not enough to create a better world. You must go far beyond that. We will gonna talk about the solutions. But it's a joke. When foreign powers shape your policies, then there's something really, really wrong with your government. Because the government of every state should be working for their people, not for a foreign entity. Now, I don't think I said something so controversial here. Who cannot understand that? There's much more to say about that subject. But I'm not even sure that I can give you the definition of AIPAC without getting banned. So, I mean, as long as we are on this tube, and there's very little you can do in this regard. Now, 3.8 billion a year to Israel. So that's the number I've received. So billions go to fund foreign militaries, while US citizens lack healthcare. Priorities reflect power and not people. So again, it's a joke. They always tell you we don't have money for that, but there's endless money for war. For war, there's never not enough money to wage war against people who now have done you nothing. They don't hate you. They don't even know you. They don't care about you. But there's always money for all what they want to do. They say, well, we cut the aid. But apparently, the aid is only cut for some people. As you can see, since 3.8 billion a year to Israel, that's a lot of money. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that. And what the country is doing. Don't you? If not, watch the news and you'll find out very soon. And the youth is underrepresented. Younger generations have little voice in government. They inherit problems they never voted for. So it's also a huge scam. They put a lot of debt that can never be paid up. And they say, yes, it's no problem. The new generation will pay for it. No, what's that scam? Who could ever, from a moral perspective, admit that kind of behavior? Especially when it goes into trillions and quadrillions. There's never any limit to it. It will only increase. So it's very disturbing. So the issue is that people have an illusion. They think that election will give them the illusion of choice and that election will change anything. Now, realize that it never did. No real reform has ever come from elections. You don't change anything by giving more power to the system. You don't change anything by saying this guy retires and I put this guy in charge of the system. It's the same system. Yes, of course, they will change little things. They will give you the illusion that things get better. They will make it very bad on one subject and then they say, since we made 10 steps in front, we'll take back 2 steps. But then they go 20 steps farther on the next occasion. Election will never give you anything. Switching parties don't change the system. Power remains in the same hands, regardless of outcomes. That's something people call the deep state. And if you want to know what a deep state is, it's not so hard to understand. You take your government, your dear elected leader. He makes his little speech, which is just propaganda, as always, and then the camera gets off. Now, the deep state is everything that happens once the camera is off. So you still have the same secretary, you still have the same cameraman, you still have the same environment, the same lobbyist writing the same propaganda. Yes, it changes a little on so little subject that it doesn't matter. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the system is always the same. It is just the facade that changes a little. It's like if you have a Christmas decoration and once you put a skeleton in the park and the next time you say, now I make a Christmas tree, you can make little changes like that. They look nice on the surface, but the underlying structure, the underlying system has not changed. Yes, on small points without any significance, but on nothing major. On critical issues, nothing changes. And it will never be, and it will never change. At least not with elections. So corporations write the rules. Lawmakers take scripts from corporate boards. Democracy has been contracted to the highest bidder. And that's nothing shocking. It always was the case. You get what you elect. You get what the system produces. So, of course, corporations with a lot of influence, like the pharmaceutical industries, the military complex, they always get what they want. One reason why the war is endless is because those corporations thrive from war. And why do you have all the issues with healthcare and so on? Because it's good business. So yes, of course, they have a big influence on the affairs. But you can develop a critical way of thinking and an analytic process. And once you can think critically and you can have an analytic process, then it is easy to see the scam and it's easy to get away from the scam. Democracy hijacked by money. The politician process is pay to play. Those without wealth are voiceless. So what I'm telling you is that the political process was always pay to play. It never was any different than that. Because if you have no money and you have no connection, well, then you can forget it. You're never part of the game. And once you're part of the game, you do what the government tells you, what your party tells you, what the system, the deep state tells you. And you don't do anything special. You don't think of anything. You don't change anything. Anything real? No. Small details? Yes. Sometimes we send 5 million people back and the next day, well, let's bring in 30 million more. Small little games like that, they play with you and you think that something really changes when nothing never changes. But by definition, it is pay to play. If you have no money, you're not part of the system. And I'm talking, of course, of a lot of money and a lot of connections. And then you only do what the system tells you to do. You never make anything different. You just obey the rules. Voting is the illusion of consent. Casting a ballot feels empowering, but legalizes coercion. It maintains the illusion that people rule themselves. It's a great magic trick they have pulled off. They make you believe that your vote counts when it never did. I guarantee you, there's no vote of anybody on earth other than those in power and the small clique, the small party that matters. And they only do what they're supposed to do, what they're told to do. But your personal opinion doesn't matter. Unless you're very wealthy and you can lobby a lot. Then you can change the balance in your favor. But if not, it won't do it. And when you vote, you are legitimizing coercion. So you approve the system that will use extreme violence against you and everybody else inside of the country and outside of the country. So it's a trap in which you should not fall. So obey kills consciousness. Following orders numbs personal morality. Historians get history's greatest evils were committed by obedient citizens. So one of the worst things, everybody is very proud to be an obedient citizen, to follow the law. But the worst atrocities on earth were always, without exceptions, committed by law-obedient citizens. So actually, if somebody tells you you are law-obedient citizens, that's one of the worst things they could come up with. Now you think it's a virtue, but it isn't. It never was, and it never will be. No serious philosopher will ever admit that being an obedient citizen to the government and respecting all the inhumane laws is a virtue. It never was and it never will be. And it doesn't matter who you elect or what you say or what you do. It will always be the same. And then they come with their slogan they really like. Just doing my job. And that's the definition of evil. That phrase has excused atrocity across time. It's the mask behind which responsibility hides. So you say, I have no responsibility in the matter. I'm only following the law. But that's one of the most evil things you can come up with. Everybody has a consciousness, and you must know, or you should learn, the difference between good and evil. And once you know that, you should choose good instead of evil. Now that's a hard thing to do, because it's actually very hard to do that. Even if you're a great philosopher, it's still hard to make the difference between good and evil and choose good instead of evil. But you still have to do that work. That's for what you came on this earth, not to obey absurd laws. You have come here to have a conscience, to know something about morality, and to have some principles. You're not supposed to be a blind, retarded order follower. Those people, what they do is, by definition, it's the worst atrocities humanity has ever seen. And you have to stop cooperating with it. You have to reject that. You have to learn the lesson that legality is not equal to morality. Now, I know that that's hard for you, because every book, every person you have ever heard tells you that that's the case. But it never was, and it never will be. Trust me, I'm a philosopher. I've written 4 Stoic books. I can guarantee you that legality has absolutely nothing in any way or shape to do with morality. Not all legal things are right. And normally none of them are. Slavery and genocide were once legal. And you can have some critical thinking, think about the current state of affairs nowadays, and ask yourself if slavery and genocide are not actually still legal. If most people you see aren't slaves, and if some do not get genocided. Now I'm talking for a very wide shape of people. But think about it, and I'm sure you can come up with something that makes sense. And the government is a religion of force. Its rituals and symbols mimic religions. But its God is coercion, not compassion. So they make you believe that what they do is good and serves the greater good. But it isn't. They make you also believe that they are compassionate. But they will never be compassionate. The only way to be compassionate is to look somebody in the eyes, is to have a frank talk with him, like a friend, and to give him some good advice. Not to use extreme violence against him when he has done nothing. And as I told you last time, most people in jail are there for victimless crimes. Can you understand that? That they didn't really harm somebody. There's just one rule, one abstract rule that they didn't follow. And those rules change all the time. And because of that, they end up in jail. Most people. Now, there are some exceptions, and those exceptions will be dealt with under the free market. The day you have the right to self-defense, people will take care of it. They won't allow somebody to harm their family members, themselves, or somebody else. They will intervene. So government equals religion of force. Its rituals and symbols mimic religion, but its God is coercion. When I say coercion, I'm just talking about extreme violence, not compassion. There's no compassion. Unless you're a human being and you have a normal talk with somebody and you give him advice, and if he doesn't follow your advice, there's no sanction. You just help him to improve, to get better. But unless you do that, when you use coercion, there's no compassion by definition. There cannot be any compassion if you use extreme violence against somebody. So as I told you, taxation is coercion's theft. You don't get to opt out. Refusal to pay invites force, not dialogue. So you can never say, I do not agree, and I do not want you to use my money in that way for those evil activities that are common and that you always use against everybody. You cannot say that. There's no dialogue. There is brute force that will be initiated against you as soon as you stop doing what they say. So in that case, when there's no dialogue and when you cannot choose what happens to yourself or to the fruit of your labors, well, it's theft. It's the definition of theft. And it's the definition of coercion. And it's the definition of extreme violence when you cannot opt out of it. I mean, if the projects are so great and everybody wants them, well, let them decide if they participate in it. You will see that nobody will. Nobody will. And it's all over. So it has nothing to do. There's no acceptance. Nobody accepts all that crap. And don't tell me that the couple of roads we see or anything else, that such a thing could never exist without government. That's a joke. Of course there can be roads, and of course there will be parks, and so on. But it will be owned by private citizens. Is that good? Well, it cannot be more worse than what you have now. Maybe it's free to entrance, maybe you pay a couple of banks to enter the entrance, and so on. And they create the law, not the state. And that's how it should be. And war is normalized crime. Government-sanctioned violence is glorified. Killing becomes acceptable when done under a flag. So don't you realize how absurd it is? Every human being, or nearly everybody, realizes that killing is bad. But as soon as the government does it, it is sanctioned and it is glorified just because you do it under flag. And as long as you fall for that, and as long as you participate in any way or form with that, nothing will improve. No, I'm not a patriot. I don't realize any affiliation with any government. I don't want any slave papers. I don't want any ID or anything else. Now, when they asked me to do my military service, of course I did everything I could to not do it, so I don't. And I try to have nothing to do with any arms of the government, because I never agree with it. I never can endorse it from a moral perspective. It goes against everything I believe in, against freedom, peace, cooperation, respect for another. It goes against everything I stand up for. And the only thing you get out of it is extreme violence. So rulers can be seen as a legalized mafia. They take, punish under threat. It is a mafia with better PR, public relation. But it's the same when you use threat against people, and if they don't cooperate, you do bad things to them that they don't like. You take all their wealth, you put them in a cage. Well, it's just as bad, if not even worse, than what the mafia would have done. Most people, if they could choose, they would rather live under the rule of the mafia, which you can easily get away of, and that will never have the same impact because people don't respect its authority, than live under state coercion, because that's much worse for you. Now, real freedom equals self-ownership. You have to realize that no one owns you. You are not the property of the state. You are a free individual, and you should have the same rights than any creature on earth, the same natural right. You should be allowed to go from wherever you want, as long as you can comply to basic rules. For example, there's no need for any border control or to any other country. Switzerland, France, England, There should be no imaginary lines. But when you go there, you have to pay for the travel. You have to pay for the plane. You have to pay for the accommodation once you're there. And you have to pay for the food and everything else. And if you cannot do that, if you cannot integrate the society without any hands out for the government, then you should not be there in the first place. But the state doesn't own you. By that I mean, he should not be able to tell you where you have to live and what you have to do. Because if he does, well, then very soon happens what you see in North Korea. When a North Korean tries to cross the border, he gets shot dead. He's risking his life, and very few people make it out of North Korea every year. And because of technological progress, new cameras and so on, mines that blow up if you walk on them, and the army that is all over the place and is looking out for people who try to cross, very few people make it out. So you are just a prisoner, you're just a slave. And in the country, you cannot go from one city to the next unless the Communist Party tells you that you're allowed to do that. So you must be very careful when you give power to such people. You tell in our place, it's not that bad. It's not that bad, really? Think about what happened recently and see how soon they cut traveling for any excuse they find. So no, you should not believe that the state owns you and the state can decide where you live and what you do and what you say. You know, it's a very bad thing when nobody can talk, when nobody can say the truth, just because there's an entity that makes law and has banned you from saying stuff that he doesn't like. That shouldn't exist, or do stuff that he doesn't like. So what we need is voluntarism. Not domination. All humans' relation should be based on consent. Ruled by force is an ethical failure. People should be allowed to choose by consent what they are doing. You see a couple of people who are working around. I think you can see them here behind me. They do it by consent. They decided that it's nice weather, that they want to go out, see the lake, have a walk, have a talk, but they do it by consent. Everything should be done by consent, which means there should be no violence used against you, so you do stuff you morally do not approve of and you reject. The world is a much better place if everything is done by consent. And if there's no central entity that intervenes, because that creates distortion and injustices. And there's just one principle that you have to follow, and it's not very hard to understand. And most people already obey by it. Most people. And the ones who don't, well, they will change their mind very quickly. As soon as there will be the right to self-defense, they will change their mind very quickly. I guarantee you that, because it will end really bad for them if they don't. And that's the non-aggression principle. Don't initiate violence, only defend. If you can get that, it's less than a sentence. It's don't initiate violence, only defend. 5 words. If you can put those 5 words in your head and follow them, the world is a much better place. For you, for me, for everybody on this earth. This principle is moral clarity in a world of excesses and excuses. As soon as you realize that, and you can just have one principle you follow, the world for humans would be much better. You say there are bad people, of course they are, but I guarantee you can deal with them. How? I'm not expecting you to be brave. I'm not expecting you to go fight, but I think you're smart enough to pay $20 a month, or $80 a month, or even $100 a month. And once you do that, you have a number you can call, the equivalent of the police. And when there's a case of self-defense, of harm, if somebody harmed your physical integrity or your wealth, well, then you have a right to self-defense. And those people will use that right for you because you give it to them and they will defend you. They will make sure that you get some indemnities for what you had to go through and suffer. But voting keeps tyranny alive. Participating, renewing the system's legitimacy, it's a ritual that sustains your own subjugation. If you think that anything will ever change because you went to a voting box and on a machine made by a foreign entity, you have clicked a donkey or an elephant, that will never change anything. It will make your life much worse. I can guarantee you. And if you stop doing that, things will get much better very soon. Not voting is moral clarity. Abstaining means refusing to grant consent. Silence is not apathy, it's dissent. So you have to stop consenting to your slavery. As long as you think it's the most great thing on earth that you are a slave, it's very hard to make things better for you. Because you, on every occasion, you ask for more slavery. You want to be less independent. You want to have less responsibility. You want to do less stuff. And you want the government to use more violence against everybody so that you have to do less stuff. And that's a vicious cycle. That's a very bad cycle to be in and to repeat it all day long. So silence is not apathy. It is dissent. The only moral standpoint you can take in front of such a corrupt system is to never participate in it. Because your vote is your chains. Every vote you do makes the chains harder that you have on your legs and makes you a bigger slave. Each ballot is a link in your own shackles. You empower what should be resisted. Stop believing in thrones. Power doesn't need a new master. It needs to be mantled. So you have to stop thinking that all you need is a new master. And if only you get the right guy in power, things will change. It needs to be dismantled. There needs to be an end one day to it. So I know that that day isn't any close because nobody's listening to me and nobody wants to listen to any anarchist, anyone who is talking about voluntarism, and anyone who has any principles. Nobody wants to listen to that. I know it. But you still have to dismantle it because power doesn't need a new master. It needs to be dismantled. It needs to end. And very soon. Democracy is my control. It makes you think you're free. Consent is manufactured. So as long as you think you're free, because you have chosen your slave master, you are far from freedom. You can't even conceive it. The consent is manufactured. It's a trick that they played. They said you voted for it, and so now you get it. But you never did. Nobody voted for all the crap humanity has suffered until now. They just play the games once they're in power, and you pay the price. So as I told you, consent is manufactured. From childhood, you're taught to obey. The system teaches you to love your cage. So they give you a cage. It looks not so bad for some people in developed countries. So they think, I'm lucky. At least I'm not starving to death like others. But it's just a cage that looks a little better. It makes you not realize your slavery as fast. But it's still there. It's a golden cage, but it's still a cage. And we don't need better rulers. We need none. The thing is not, you will not improve the system by finding a better ruler. That never changed anything. Not anything real. Yes, on small details, yes, I admit, on small details, it will change, but on not on anything really important. The deep state, the thing that makes the government work, is still the same. The army is the same, the people who work in the army is the same, the secretary is the same. You changed one guy because you're tired of listening to the other one with his propaganda. So you put the new guy in and his propaganda, even though it's the same crap, it never makes any sense. It sounds a little different. So you think, I've made it. Now things get better. But they don't. They never do. The answer isn't a new king. It's no king at all. The fear of freedom is learned. We have been taught that the chaos comes without rulers. In truth, peace comes when force ends. So it's a trick they have played on you. They have told you that there would be total chaos if there would be no ruler. And the truth is the opposite. Peace comes when force ends. And the only way to stop force is by stopping to comply with authority. It's by having your own moral compass. Real change, withdraw consent. If you want real change, you have to withdraw consent. Don't feed the machine. Starve it or of legitimacy. So you have to stop feeding the machine. It's a very evil entity. And if you keep feeding it, well, then things won't get better. You have to starve it of legitimacy. Because the illusion of legitimacy exists in the mind of a lot of people, not in my mind. I know that's all crap, all made up bullshit. So I will never fall for it. But a lot of people still do, all day long. We can talk about the rail blocked by oil and auto. So high-speed rail threatens cars, airlines, and oil profits. Strategies by industries keep the public reliant on cars and oil. Corporation kills alternatives to protect their empire. Infrastructure remains frozen in the 20th century by design. So a lot of things could be better if the interests that dictate our life stop having such an influence on us. And it will never happen unless you stop giving your consent to them. And a lot of things would be possible if the free market can decide. Progress will be much faster. if there's not all the legal hindrance they put, or the legal barriers they put in front of everybody, so that nobody can really compete, unless a very small group of people who are extremely wealthy and have the government under their sphere of influence due to the lobbying. So yes, of course, the infrastructure in the US and in a lot of countries would be much better if there wasn't all the legal stuff that makes it impossible to improve it. Now, let's talk about financial imbalance of global military interventions. Asymmetric spending defines modern warfare. Iran's 30 million counterattack costs contrast Israel's 1 billion defense response the same night. It is said that Iran, for its counterattack on Israel, has spent 30 millions. It cost them only 30 millions. But at the same time, Israel, for one night of defending themselves, it cost them 1 billion. So you see the imbalance. They are poor states, but because of asymmetric spending and because of a new kind of warfare where you can defend yourself without having to spend billions, they have managed to pull something up with very little at their disposal. So that's quite impressive if you look at it, because there's a huge difference between 30 millions and 1 billion. That's what it said. That's what one expert told me. And I think he's quite right about that. Wealthy nations bleed money for dominance. Poor states find cheaper ways to retaliate. Now, everything I said is correct. But I'm talking about a lot of symptoms. I give you also some solutions. But I'm talking about a lot of symptoms. And if we want to take a look at the root cause of all the evil I'm talking about, then we'll have to talk about debt, because debt enables domination. Governments borrow endlessly to fund control, war, and propaganda. Debt finances coercion across the globe. The US national debt is now 37 trillions and rising exponentially. As debt grows, so do interest payments, forcing governments to adopt even more draconian measures to fund the unpayable, so that debt will never be paid back. Everybody knows that. Not in real terms. Not so that people get really back what they put in. Everybody knows that it's a huge scam. That's a huge Ponzi. But without that possibility for that very evil entity you elect every 5 years, but without the possibility for them to spend endlessly, all the crap wouldn't exist at the first place, because they would never have the money to finance that kind of nonsense, those kind of atrocities against humanity. They would never be able to do that if the debt wasn't increasing exponentially and without any restraint. If that wasn't the case, well, then they would have to do stuff that makes more sense from an economical standpoint. But as long as they can wage endless war and you pay for it, they will keep doing it. It's a Ponzi logic, inevitable collapse. So you can never stop a Ponzi. Once a Ponzi has started, you can never stop it. And it will always come to the same end. There is no way it ends well. Government will extract wealth from everyone connected to the system through taxes, inflation, or asset seizures. Ponzi cannot be reversed. Once lies and theft take root, trust cannot return. The system will collapse under the weight of its own pride and greed. So the system will collapse under its own lies and greed. And you cannot do anything to change that. Now, this is what they intend. It is not something that happens by accident. The middle class must be destroyed. A free, independent population threatens centralized control. Keeping people poor and dependent ensures obedience. So why are things getting worse for the middle class? I've given a couple of examples. Food prices increasing, rent increasing, healthcare increasing, and all the rest. I gave a couple of examples. But why is that the case? It is because it serves them very well. They want you poor and dependent on the system. So the middle class must be destroyed because they want you poor and dependent on the system. And an UBI is a trap. An universal basic income sounds kind, but grants total control. The state decides where you live, work, and go. So there's very little freedom when the government has total power over your life. When he gives you your livelihood, when he decides what you can do and what you cannot do, and where you can go. and how much you get every month. There's very little freedom in that case. Now, it gives total control to the state, and that's what they're after. That's what they want. What I want to point out, finally, is that the system cannot be fixed. No reform will solve systemic corruption. The structure is built to perpetuate itself. No reform will solve systemic corruption. So the thing is, the system you're talking about is so bad, is so corrupted, is so evil that there's no way of reforming it. The structure is built to perpetuate itself. So it will always come back, even if you pay up the entire debt we talked about, the 37 trillions. It wouldn't change anything because the mentality will not change. The new kings and the new queens want the same as every other king and every other queen before them. They want a treasury full of money so they can do whatever they want. The never-ending war and every project that comes to the head. And to get that, well, they'll use extreme violence against everybody. And you will found their lifestyle and their ambitions and their projects. You will pay for all that. And what I have to tell you now is hard to accept. But they thrive on your misery. Your suffering fuels their luxury and power. The system feeds off the broken. You are the victim that allows them to do what they do. Without you, they would never be able to pull it off. Your consent, your belief in authority, gives them the power they have. And they will use that power against you. And you know that they will do it. And you still give it to them every 5 years. And that has to stop. As long as that doesn't stop, nothing will get any better. I was saying that money fuels the beast. Your taxes and labor founds the machinery of control. Every contribution strengthens your oppressor. So that's the really evil thing. You make it more evil by participating in it, by obeying their laws, by giving them all your energy, financial, mental, and so on. You make it much worse for humanity while you do that. So you have to stop feeding the beast. Disobedience can starve the system. Stop cooperating. Withdraw your energy and consent. Power never returns. What you surrender out of fear is never given back. It goes by feeding on panic. So you have to think a little. Why are there all those things that make you so scared nowadays? And whom do they serve? How come that you keep giving them more power endlessly? If you just stopped at one point, it wouldn't be so evil. But you keep giving them more power. And with every election, with every new dear leader, he comes up with no new laws, and you have less power. And a lot of those laws are by definition freedom-killing laws. Everybody knows that. But you still go with it. You still ask for them because you feel scared. But who has created the world you are so scared of? Don't you think about that? Don't you think there's a link by those who propose you a solution and the threat you are facing? Don't you think that there's a link? That is a very nice thing to do? Make people scared and then they accept what they would have never accepted without? Have you never thought about that? Obedience grows the beast. Each act of compliance strengthens tyranny. The system expands because people obey. So compliance is the issue. That's why things are so bad on this world. Because you never see a free man anywhere. You only see slaves who are always compliant with the system and think it's so awesome because they can put a cross of a piece of paper or hit a machine made by a foreign entity and select a donkey or an elephant. As long as people are always compliant and do exactly what the system asks of them, well, things will never get any better. There's a way of healing our world. It's called disobedience. Change begins when you say no. Non-cooperation dismantles the machine of control. The machine of control can only exist as long as most people obey. When a majority of people, not even a majority, but when some people start resisting, it falls apart. Then it cannot rule by law anymore. And then you can go through the principles we talked about, the non-aggression principle, and real stuff you can believe in, live, and die for, because they are not evil, not the crap they teach you in law school. That's all made up bullshit. And the only reason why it exists, it's that's good for the government. So 10% can topple it. So you only need probably around 10%. A small committed minority is enough. The system collapses when enough people withdraw consent. And it's really possible to wake up 10% of the population. That's not something that's totally impossible. And they would not have enough prison cells to put them on. And they cannot use extreme violence against those 10% just because they stop cooperating with the system. They cannot do. They are peaceful human beings. It will not go off. The 90% the rest, they will not look to a massacre of 10% of people just because they withdraw. They stop cooperating. So a small committed minority is enough. And by committed, you don't have to be so committed. You just have to learn no. One single word made of 2 letters. If you can get that into your system, well, yeah, then you're good. You're good to go. You know what you have to do. The system collapses when enough people withdraw consent. So start withdrawing your consent as soon as you can on whatever topic you can. So you have to be rejecting elections, schools, and systems. So every system, every school, and every election must be rejected. They are just indoctrination. And they will just make the evil system we are talking about last longer. The entire structure is compromised. Don't you realize that? There's nothing normal in the system we live in. The entire structure is totally compromised. Freedom begins where participation ends. You only can be free if you stop participating. As long as you participate, you're just a useful idiot. You're just one more of those slaves of the system, and nothing will change. Say no when you're ready. Courage doesn't need permission. When the moment comes, act, withdraw, and refuse. So I know it's hard, because we all depend more or less on the system we are talking about. But you still can strive to be as free of the system as possible and withdraw consent as much as possible. I know it will be hard. I know you will face consequences. But the more people do it, the less the consequences will be. Because they don't have enough prison cells. They cannot sanction everybody. And they cannot use extreme violence against everybody. It wouldn't end well for them. Just stop being what they teach you to be. And start being a human being that somebody can respect, that somebody can look up to. And that's possible. I'm not asking for very difficult stuff here. I'm asking you to learn 2 letters, 1 word. To say no. That's all you need. To learn to say no. That's not so hard. People don't want to do anything. So just say no. And once you get that, then realize the non-aggression principle. That you never should initiate violence and only defend yourself, your family, and your wealth. That's all you have to do. And it won't be that hard. Because the free market will create solution, much better solution than you have nowadays. So it's not that hard. The process I'm talking about takes an awakening. People have to wake up. People have to realize that we, the anarchists, are not talking about bullshit all day long. That there's a real issue with the system. And it won't be fixed by just electing a new leader, putting somebody else on the throne. We need no kings. We don't need more kings. We had kings our entire life. So this was a very long intervention and I still have to edit it, which will take more time. I thank you for watching, and if you can, like and subscribe, and I hope I see you soon. There's a lot of other subjects. I don't just talk about anarchy on my channel. So I'm sure you find something that will interest you. I learn a lot by producing those interventions, and I'm glad that you come along, and I hope to see you soon. Take care and bye-bye.